Join us tonight in a celebration of the 20th anniversary of Star Wars. Experience the excitement and uncover the mystery of Star Wars' enduring appeal. See the magic behind the special edition and discover its world of remastered sound and state-of-the-art special effects.
Look, Jabba, even I get bored sometimes.
The Force will be with you, always.
When was the last time you queued up to see a film? Actually queued because you wanted to. For me, it was 20 years ago. The year was 1977. The film was Star Wars. At the time, there was nothing quite like it. The spectacle, the sounds, the story. The Star Wars trilogy has now spanned 2 generations of cinema goers and has become more popular today than ever. In this programme, we'll try to figure out just what it is about the tale that has kept it so fresh. We'll examine the journey it took to bring these classic adventures back to the big screen and share in the magic and mystery behind the special edition releases of Star Wars, The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. Queues around the block, cinemas open 24 hours a day to cope with the demand. 20 years ago, these were familiar scenes as filmgoers flocked to see Star Wars. The film soon established itself as a hallmark for entertainment, technology, and good old-fashioned fun.
The first things I saw were a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. Anybody that knows me knows that my life was changed at that moment.
I went to the showing at the Academy with my young son. And of course, when the film started, the shouting started, shrieking. I wondered, what's going on here? Well, they knew nothing about the picture. They responded to the images.
The adults were very puzzled, but the kids went ballistic. And within, I'd say, 2 or 3 minutes after that, the adults started following right along, sharing in what became the prevailing joy of that experience. It was a very heady screening.
I'll never forget that when the movie started and that first spaceship came over, I mean, I cheered, the audience cheered, and I thought, this is great. Then the spaceship that was chasing it came out, and it just kept going and going and going. And by the time that thing passed overhead, the audience was freaking out. I was freaking out, and I knew what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. Very shortly after that, Darth Vader made his first appearance. Now remember, this is the first showing on the first day that the movie was released. And Darth Vader showed up, and all of the people in the audience, including myself, started booing and hissing Darth Vader. Now, how did we know to do that?
Commander, tear this ship apart until you found those plans and bring me the passengers. I want them alive.
I was kind of stunned. I was depressed, actually. And I went back to the hotel, and I thought about it for 2 days, and I basically said to my producer, listen, I don't know what we're doing, but it's not really the kind of cinema I think I want to be doing. This guy's making Star Wars. I'm not even in the same universe. I'm not even in the same century. And so in a sense, it changed my whole direction. It turned me around 180 degrees as to what I felt I ought to be doing. And what's interesting is the next film I made was Alien.
We seem to be made to suffer. It's our lot in life.
I was in the provinces, in the Midlands, in Warwickshire, and a member of the Royal Shakespeare Company. It certainly had an impact on the company because during the course of the, I suppose, 2 or 3 weeks that movie was showing, everyone went to see it, not once, but again and again. We were having an intense diet of Shakespeare and Star Wars.
It just isn't fair. Oh, Biggs is right. I'm never going to get out of here. Is there anything I might do to help?
No, not unless you can alter time, speed up the harvest, or teleport me off this rock.
There are very few pictures that were the kind of event and phenomena where you can go back and have that communal experience. It's not that Star Wars is the greatest picture of all time, it's that it had an effect on the culture that was seismic.
I can't hold off forever.
Some rescue. Raymond, you didn't have a plan for getting out?
Leave the plane, sweetheart.
Why did you...
What the hell are you doing?
Somebody has to save our skins. Into the garbage chute, fly boy.
Not only was it technically brilliant at the time, but the story was so great. I had a huge crush on Luke Skywalker, a huge crush on Han Solo, and I wanted to be Princess Leia because you had these two gorgeous men fighting over you.
What do you think of Ron?
Trying not to, kid.
Good. It was everything we'd seen a bazillion times before, but done in an entirely new way, with a different spin on it. Sure, we'd seen that before, but not like this.
Look, your worshipfulness, let's get one thing straight. I take orders from just one person, me.
So wonder you're still alive. Will somebody get this big walking carpet out of my way?
We could believe in this alien world, this futuristic world, but there was a very appropriate element of irony mixed in with it too. And I remember it making me laugh a great deal.
He made a fair move. Screaming about it can't help you.
Yeah, it's not wise for a Wookiee.
But sir, nobody worries about upsetting a droid.
It's because a droid don't pull people's arms out of their sockets when they lose. Wookiees are known to do that.
It's a very innocent, open movie.
I suggest a new strategy, Artu. Let the Wookiee win.
It has all the philosophies and the thoughts of the characters, and you know, there are concepts there. But basically, it's a simple story, magically told.
What should Artu and I do if we're discovered here?
Lock the door.
And hope they don't have blasters.
That isn't very reassuring.
As soon as the movie was over, we both just agreed. It was one of those sort of non-communications. We just left the theater, Cheryl and I. Said, well, that was great. Didn't say a word, just went and got in line and stood in line for 2.5 hours and saw the movie again.
We need our diversions. It was an incredible diversion. It was kind of a rebirth for movies, too. As I remember, movies weren't all that wildly successful. Then it took us back to the movies. It certainly was something you had to go see.
It became a blockbuster because of children seeing it 10 times. I thought it was a strange addiction. But there are things you can be addicted to that are much worse for you, of course. But they made this a phenomenon.
We had a pirate, and we had a wizard, and we had a farm boy and a princess, and we had bickering robots, and I thought, what's not to like? This thing's gonna be bigger than Planet of the Apes. That wasn't one of my predictions.
Yeah, I was shocked by the response. I did not expect it to be what it turned out to be. I mean, the biggest hit science fiction movie at that point was 2001, and I think it made like $24 million or something like that, and all the Planet of the Apes films and all those kinds of films had done about $16 million. And I expected the film to do, you know, somewhere between 10 and $15 million. You know, instead it did, you know, 300 and something.
Star Wars went on to receive Oscars for art direction, costume design, film editing, sound, music, and visual effects.
Actually, I was terribly disappointed in how it did. I'd expected something much bigger.
You don't think about lines around the block and all of that stuff. I mean, I was 19 years old.
Why don't you take a look around? You know what's about to happen, what they're up against. They could use a good pilot like you. You're turning your back on them.
What good's the reward if you ain't around to use it? Besides, attacking that battle station ain't my idea of courage. It's more like suicide.
In my mind, I was thinking of it as a kind of Saturday afternoon movie for kids, really, a kind of popcorn Buck Rogers show, good, you know, sound and light show for young people.
Use the Force, Luke.
Thinking that it would be successful, but never imagining that it would be the sort of worldwide, international success that it became.
I have you now.
You're all clear, kid. Now let's blow this thing and go home.
I would like to be taken back to that Saturday night at the Regal Cinema, Leamington Spa, 20 years ago, and have all of that same excitement and naivety and innocence reawaken. It's not a lot to ask, is it?
With each film, the Star Wars universe continued to unfold. We were transported from the ice planet of Hoth to the moons of Endor, to the swamps of Dagobah.
I'm looking for someone. Looking? Found someone you have, I would say, hmm?
We met the wise and the wicked, from Yoda to Boba Fett to Jabba the Hutt. And we delved into the deepest reaches of the Force.
Release your anger. Only your hatred can destroy me.
We were all so hooked into the characters at that time. If George had stood up with a map and a pointer and told us about the characters, everybody would have loved it. But George kept pushing the envelope. He kept refining the film on a technological level, and he kept increasing the narrative stakes. He kept making the story a little bit darker and even more intense. And I thought that George's scripts for the movies got better with each succeeding film.
All the images in all three movies for George are very much about butting up mechanical images against natural images, because that's the battle that's going on in the whole saga. So the Empire is always heavily mechanized and metallic and engineered, and the good guys are always much more funky and organic. So you get these huge walkers pounding across the snowdrifts in Empire. They're very effective, but they're effective for getting across, but they're not agile and they can be defeated.
The first one had a great climax. Everybody was just so happy, and, you know, medals were bestowed. How was I going to end this thing and not make you feel like, wait a minute, what happens here? There's no ending.
I love you.
I know.
I just accepted it as a second movement, or let's say the second act of a three-act play, and just simply depended on the characters and on the way the story was told to make you feel satisfied that you had seen some sort of closure, but wanted to see more. It says, this is a continuing story.
There was a whole new, brand new kind of feeling coming into the movies at that moment.
Split up and head back to the surface. And see if you can get a few of those TIE fighters to follow you.
So to be a part of that as an actor was certainly great news for me.
It's too close.
The last one was like, I was amazed about that you can make, out of half of a movie, a finale. You know, it's pretty much like the longest showdown ever in movie history. This goes on for an hour and it works.
Let's go out with something really hot for these folks. A big hit out of '77. Ah, Star Wars, nothing but Star Wars.
Besides their success, the films have had a lasting cultural impact, with parody being one of the most sincere forms of praise.
I can't breathe in this thing.
Okay, here we go. Marge, you're as pretty as Princess Leia and as smart as Yoda.
Oh, Homer.
Star Wars!
Join us after the break when we'll be exploring the power of the Force. Knights with shining sabers, a princess in distress, and a valiant young soldier with a mystical mentor. It's the stuff of legends and part of what makes the entire Star Wars saga so compelling. For beyond the wizardry and special effects lies a classic tale of good and evil.
What's this?
In the Star Wars trilogy, the filmmaker George Lucas was deliberately trying to create a modern fairy tale.
Who is she? She's beautiful. I'm afraid I'm not quite sure, sir.
What's a fairy tale? A fairy tale is a story about courage for young people. Because throughout time, throughout history, young people need to know that courage can help them get through a wall of fire.
Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. You're my only hope.
The story of Star Wars is the story that has been told 1,000 different ways in 1,000 different cultures, but it's always the same about an innocent who's put through a trial and emerges a hero, and a hero is someone who becomes able to care for something larger than himself, able to give of himself, so his concerns are not personal and solitary, they become about a larger issue.
There was something on this journey that you're going to find. It's been called the Holy Grail, the Golden Fleece, the Ark of the Covenant in Raiders of the Lost Ark. The old word from the myths is the boon, that suggests a gift. It's the thing that is won on the journey that will change the world when you bring it back.
Vader was seduced by the dark side of the Force.
The Force?
And the Force is what gives the Jedi his power. It's an energy field created by all living things. It surrounds us and penetrates us. It binds the galaxy together.
What I got out of it was just believe in yourself. You know, the confidence was what the Force really was. Obi-Wan kept saying, go into yourself, Luke. Look, it's you, the Force, you know. And people say, well, it's God and this, that, and the other. But I just think it really means, you know, look into yourself and you can pretty much pull anything off.
A belief in one's own powers, especially one's own powers to do good, because the underlying morality of Star Wars is a very, very positive one.
And he had borrowed from Wizard of Oz or Kurosawa films, or, you know, he's just steeped in film lore. So it just sort of went through his pores, and that's how he imagines things. George has an extraordinarily visual imagination.
I thought he had reached something very powerful and primordial, and that part of the story, the human part of the story, was clearly going to work.
We got some T-shirts from George in the mail from the set that said Revenge of the Jedi on them. I still have them, and I hope to send my son through college with them when I sell them at the fan fairs in a few years. After I started wearing these shirts around, I saw George a couple of months later, and he said, well, no, we're not doing that anymore. And I said, why is that? What's the title? He said, Return of the Jedi. I said, what's the difference? He said, revenge isn't a Jedi concept.
Use your aggressive feelings, boy. Let the hate flow through you.
I think just from experience, you go out to try to be a good guy, and sometimes the good side doesn't respect you, or they turn on you. And it can really make you bitter. And you say, look, I've been trying to be good all this time, and you know, why? I'm not getting anything out of it, so let me just flip over and work on the side of evil. It's so easy to be evil.
You underestimate the power of the dark side. If you will not fight, then you will meet your destiny.
January 1997, the Star Wars Trilogy Special Edition. Stars and fans alike clamor to experience the film, Why is it that 20 years after its initial release, the appeal of this classic adventure is stronger than ever?
I had never been as kinetically thrilled about watching a world that somebody had created that I just wanted to exist in forever. It was really a pretty seminal event, and I think the lives of all of my peers in that entire generation, as a matter of fact.
This movie brought the movies to a different age 20 years ago, and I think it's going to be the same situation here 20 years later, because kids are really going to get to see what a real movie is like.
It's exciting. I never thought something like this would happen, but it's been a big thrill.
You don't need to see his identification.
We don't need to see his identification.
Move along.
Move along. Move along.
Since 1983, the Star Wars trilogy could only be seen on television. So an entire generation has grown up without experiencing the films in the way that George Lucas intended. The 20th anniversary of Star Wars gave him the opportunity to restore the films to his original vision.
Star Wars was designed to be a theatrical experience. It was designed to be on the big screen. Sound is extremely important, and it's very important to the overall enjoyment of the film that it be big.
Stop that ship! Blast them!
For those who have never seen it on the big screen, they have really missed the point of the movie. They really have missed the excitement that happens when you sit with several hundred other people, and the electricity that goes through the audience when you see that movie. One of the things I wanted to do was preserve the film so that it could be a viable piece of entertainment in the 21st century.
What's that flashing?
Films, do deteriorate and they disappear. And I think this one had deteriorated a lot more than anybody expected in 20 years. At the same time, I had an ulterior motive that I'd been thinking about for a long time ever since the films were finished, which is there were various things, especially in the original film, that I wasn't satisfied with. Special effects shots that never really were finished, scenes that I'd wanted to include that couldn't have been included for some reason, mostly money and time. I looked at the 20th anniversary as a way as, well, if we're going to reissue them, maybe Fox will go along with allowing me to refurbish them also. So they agreed to that, and that's really what started this whole thing.
In 1995, the restoration began with a concerted effort by 20th Century Fox, Lucasfilm, Skywalker Sounds, and Industrial Light and Magic. The task was more daunting than anyone expected.
The most obvious thing that's happened is we've gone back to the original negative, cleaned it up considerably, redone a lot of the optical effects, the wipes, the dissolves, and improved the quality of the film, because it was deteriorating.
Holding her is dangerous. Word of this gets out, it could generate sympathy for the rebellion in the Senate.
I have traced the rebel spies to her. Now she is my only link to finding their secret base.
The actual original negative was so far gone that unless we actually did this at this time, we were never going to have the film to be able to release ever again.
Darth Vader isn't black anymore. He starts out coming up to a navy blue and then getting brighter and brighter as the film continues to deteriorate.
There will be no one to stop us this time.
Yes, sir.
Part of our task was to take this negative and to try and just get the film so they look the way people remember them looking when they first saw them 15, 20 years ago.
So we brought in a team of film restorationists to start a full-scale film restoration. The first step was to take the original negative apart and physically rewash the entire negative. From that point, we realized that the opticals, which we couldn't rewash because the dirt was built into the elements, also had to be recomposited.
Compositing allows separately photographed items to be placed in the same scene. For example, the seeker ball, the lightsaber, and the chess pieces are combined with live action to make up one final shot in the film. Creating composites for the original release of the trilogy required film technicians to physically handle the negative. This led to wear and tear as well as dirt deposits on the final picture. Today, compositing takes place with computers, but before this technology could be applied to Star Wars, all the original elements had to be located. Some scenes had as many as 40 elements for a single shot, as was the case for the asteroid sequence in Empire. Normally, these elements are thrown away after the film is finished.
In the case of Star Wars and Empire and Jedi, all those pieces exist. That was due to the fact that George kept everything. So that gives you the ability to do this.
You're not actually going into an asteroid field.
They'd be crazy to follow us, wouldn't they?
Although Star Wars required the most attention, The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi had their fair share of technical limitations.
One of the biggest sequences we worked on Empire Strikes Back was the snow battle, the walkers and the speeders in the snow. All of that was done at a time that we used optical technology, of course, to do all that compositing. And a telltale sign that something's been optically composited is a black line around it. And when you have a sequence that takes place in outer space against stars, it's easy to reach a point where those black lines don't show up. But when you have a sequence that takes place against snow in the daylight, every hint of that black matte line becomes very visible. And so the first time through doing the snow battle here 17 years ago, a lot of effort went into finding ways to minimize that black line. One of the ways was to not print all of the elements at their full opacity.
All right, I'm coming in.
Consequently, when you see the snow battle on film, you may notice that there's part of the scenery is visible through the cockpit. And it was a constant trade-off of how transparent can we make the cockpit? At what point is the black line more objectionable than the transparency? And so there was an opportunity to go back into those shots, use the computer technology, and to eliminate all the transparency, but also not have any matte lines.
Another unique aspect of the trilogy is the sound design created in this unknown world.
We would be honored if you would join us.
20 years ago, Ben Burt set out to capture an organic array of sounds that would soon come to characterize lightsabers and droids. Now he's back, digitally enhancing the sounds that have come to define the world of Star Wars.
This is all your fault.
We didn't want to throw out the sound in the film and do it over. There were so many classic things in it. So many things that we could do better. And they also represent what the film is and how it's known to people. So that we did our best to bring them to the audience as clearly and as high fidelity as possible now.
The whole company is based on the philosophy that sound is 50% of the experience. And one of the things that I'm most proud of is the work that both Gary and Ben have done in the remastering of the soundtrack, because the original mix was so complex, so good, but there was no technology to actually hear it. And one of the things that George has spent an enormous amount of money trying to develop is a THX system in which allows theaters to present films in the way in which filmmakers actually make them.
THX is, for lack of a better term, it's a philosophy. THX was something that George started back around Return of the Jedi when he developed a specification that theaters needed to meet. They had to use certain types of speakers and components that would deliver a certain performance to be called a THX theater. And for us, it's, it's a plus because you work, hours on end and doing these little nuances, and if it goes out into the theater that can't reproduce it, that the audience won't hear those tiny little things we've done.
Another advance in theatre technology is digital sound. All 3 films in the special edition have been remastered digitally.
The advantage of the sound being presented digitally is that you have 5 channels of sound. So we've redesigned the sound field in the film to bring more of the sound off to go around the audience. So a spaceship can fly from behind you and move all the way to another corner. You also can reproduce low frequencies much more effectively, so you can get a subwoofer, a rumble that's much more effective. Vader uses the Force, and there's a rumble, and we've made you hear that rumble now.
find your lack of faith disturbing.
Here they come.
I think we have the music sounding much clearer now with the split surrounds. You can hear the whole orchestra and a lot of the nuances in the music that might have gotten garbled or a little buried in the original versions.
When we come back, we'll be looking at the trilogy's special effects and a few surprises for the future. When Star Wars was made 20 years ago, director George Lucas's vision was limited by the technology available. That's all changed now, and in restoring the trilogy, he's finally been able to realize his dreams.
This is it.
The digital technology frees you up, especially in a fantasy film like this, in ways that are basically overwhelming. You could think of things, and you can write things in science fiction and fantasy, but it's very hard to make that literal.
George had very specific shots that he wanted to be able to achieve, but it was extremely difficult to do that with models on wires. It was impossible then with motion capture to actually get really quick pans. You know, they had to be separate shots. The models couldn't fly directly over the head of the camera without seeing how that it was shaky. And so although for us, when we first saw it, it was still powerful, it was still big, he never got visually the dynamic shots that he actually wanted to get. So we've redone those. Now you can actually see them. They come straight over camera, they go underneath camera, and we can pan with them. That was a real challenge, but really a great deal of fun to do.
Mos Eisley Spaceport. You will never find a more wretched hive of scum and villainy. We must be cautious.
And Mos Eisley was one of the scenes that actually prompted this whole adventure of redoing the movie. I couldn't make it into this bustling spaceport that it was supposed to be. It looked like a little tiny town because I only had like a half a street to shoot on and no real special effects or matte paintings to work with. So I've added a few scenes, and at the same time I've taken a lot of the special effects shots that weren't really as good as I'd hoped they would be because they were sort of prototype technology. And I've been able to improve them and just add that little difference, which is, for me, what makes a shot special.
There's been some attempts we've been making just to see how far we can push sort of the digital backlot idea, that we can do more and more work with synthetic sets. And we're refining the technology to make, characters and creatures look more realistic than they have before.
The idea of digital backlot is best illustrated by Mos Eisley. Miniatures and blue screen actors are photographed separately, then digitally removed from their surroundings. They're then composited to the photographed miniature. Through computer graphics, elements such as this speeder bike are created and added to the composite, along with other digital elements like Gluck's land speeder and the Ronto creature. These Jawas on top of the creature put the final touches to the scene.
Things that would occur to George that might make a moment a little different or might open up a sequence a little more, let the audience see something they hadn't seen before, and just in general to kind of add a new twist to a moment or extend a moment a little more. Those shots tended to be the ones that required a new shot from scratch, like the arrival at Mos Eisley and the Falcon's arrival in Cloud City and opening up the singing number in Return of the Jedi.
Return of the Jedi hosts a wide variety of exotic and bizarre creatures from throughout the galaxy. Nowhere is this better seen than in Jabba's palace, with an out-of-this-world band and a singer named Cy Snoodles.
Originally, George envisioned a large musical number at the very beginning in Jabba's palace, but the state-of-the-art animatronics had only reached a certain level. And although there were a lot of characters, none of them could really quite move properly. Cy Snoodles couldn't really open her mouth. She couldn't lip sync properly. Her eyes didn't move. It was, it was a very complex creature to develop. And I think this gave us the opportunity to actually open that up.
There was a stage built over here at ILM where we shot the plate photography for the new footage. And then we eventually put our CG characters into that.
By making them computer graphics, we're able to get them to get up and sing and dance a little more than they were able to first time around.
We've added one new character that they didn't have the time to actually develop on the third film, Yazam, and he acts as a counterpoint to Sai, and they have a little duet, and it's just a fun musical number.
Another character receiving a digital makeover was mentioned but mysteriously absent from the first film.
Whoa.
Jabba the Hutt made his debut in Return of the Jedi as a massive mechanical slug requiring 6 operators. Scripted to appear in the first film, scenes were shot with a stand-in actor for Jabba. The plan was to replace him in post-production with a stop-motion puppet.
The Jabba the Hutt scene with Han Solo, part of it was that we ran out of time. Part of it was that ILM had so much pressure on them to do so many shots in such a limited amount of time. It became apparent very early on there was no way to put a big stop-motion special effects sequence in the middle of the movie.
It was a scene that didn't need to be in the film if only the first film was going to be completed. And of course, he had no idea that the film would be successful, so that he would be allowed to finish the second and third chapter of the film. So once he was able to do it, then it became an important scene to put back because it was an introduction to Jabba.
Solo!
Right here, Jabba. Been waiting for you.
Have you not?
You didn't think I was going to run, did you?
This is the original play that George shot. So the plan was for us to remove this actor and replace him with Jabba. He had to be physically in that space where this actor was, doing all the same things in a similar kind of style. The ultimate goal is to make it look like Jabba was on the set talking to Harrison Ford, and we just photographed it. This project here was about 5 shots. It took about a year to do. We take the picture of some of the stuff we found. We use some of the off-the-shelf software to build a 3-dimensional wireframe mesh. This is kind of equated with taking a canoe without a canvas and building the rungs of the canoe and then wrapping it with canvas. And then the next process is to actually paint the creature. And with the painting of the creature, it also involves the actual texture of the surface of the characters.
After the modeling and lighting of the computer-generated character is complete, the task of moving this once-immovable slug created a new set of challenges.
The actual motion of Jabba never really existed before. Even in the rubber manifestation in the third one, there was a real sarcasm about him, even though he didn't really move that much. Over time, it became evident that the mass of the character would allow us to make him move like a sea lion. We had to slim it down to convince the audience that it actually had the ability to move. Over a span of how many years, when he makes it to the third one, he gained an enormous amount of weight, from eating some of those greasy little frogs.
We got to a certain point where everything was set, but there was one problem. Han Solo walks around Jabba, and Jabba had not been designed yet. Of course, this stuff was shot 20 years ago, and we were stuck.
Not only did I have to get Jabba close to him, who had a larger mass than this character, we had to somehow shift Han. It would have been literally impossible for him to walk behind the Jabba character because of the tail. So George had the idea, so why don't you have him step on his tail?
Even I get bored sometimes. You think I had a choice?
It's not just a scene about digitally replacing, a placement actor with a CG character. It's also a scene now that actually shows the dynamics between the two of them and their relationship. And it's a very funny little moment.
Jabba, you're a wonderful human being.
George Lucas is already at work on another trilogy. It'll tell the story of Luke's father, Anakin Skywalker, his rise to Jedi knighthood, and his fall to the power of the dark side.
How did my father die?
A young Jedi named Darth Vader, who was a pupil of mine until he turned to evil, helped the Empire hunt down and destroy the Jedi Knights. He betrayed and murdered your father.
To watch somebody fall from grace at the level at which Anakin does is going to be extremely painful and yet illuminating for all of us.
Obi-Wan never told you what happened to your father.
I've been writing the last 2 years. We've got a lot of designs done. We're doing casting. We're building sets. It's all moving along. And now I'm going back to direct again, but it's been 20 years.
Beyond the special effects and sounds that have become so familiar to us, it's clear that Star Wars has a special place in movie history. For some people, it's a classic adventure story, beautifully told. For others, it's shown that there are no limits to the imagination. For the rest of us, well, it's just the sheer fun of the ride. But whatever the reason, one thing is for sure. For 2 generations, Star Wars will always be part of their most cherished movie memories. And with the promise of chapters yet to come, the adventure is far from over. May the Force be with you.